This is so nice. So, yeah, I realized that this one, which I was thinking like I could say, this is my new book, and it's called, and then basically spend the next 30 minutes reading the title, because that's part of the sort of goof or whatever with this, is that it has a title that I think is 7,000 words and about 39,000 characters. But I realized that this one and a book that I wrote called Ebb, they were both kind of COVID books. That's where this one started, because first, I'd always wanted to do a book that was all a constraint, and that's what Ebb was. And then I'd also always wanted to do a book that reflected or tried to kind of honor another book of mine, or another book that's a favorite of mine called A Humument by Tom Phillips, where him and another artist were like outside of a bookshop, and they were kind of at like a listless or just confused point of what they were going to do next, and they both said, okay, we're going to go into this bookshop. I think they said you could spend X amount of money, and whatever you get, that's going to be our next project. And then Tom Phillips got a book called A Human Document by W.H. Malik, which is like a pretty standard Victorian novel, and wound up devoting the rest of his life to what he called illuminating it, which is, I mean, a practice that goes back a ways, but basically painting over it and doing erasure stuff with it. And so along with a constraint book, a book in that vein was something that I always wanted to do. And so that's how this one started. The first book I did it, or attempted it with, was called Bibliomania by Thomas Frognall Dibdin. And I got really, it might have been just like a bad stretch of kind of the COVID months and years where I just got bummed out and I threw it away. And so the book that I finally did it with was called Journal of a Disappointed Man by W.N.P. Barbellion, which is just this, it's this journal sort of about this person's experience with multiple sclerosis, but also just kind of life. And I wanted it to be a physical book that's in the public domain, so I bought an old copy, started like annotating it, scribbling on it. My kids would draw things on it. My father had passed around this time, and so I had some like artifacts from his life. There's like a page of his diary that I glued into it and taped in like other images and things like that, and then mailed that to John. And then on top of that, wanted to do something to kind of run concurrent with all of those pages after they were scanned in. So I wrote this loose kind of manifesto-y thing. So we had done all that, and then one day I looked up what the book is with the longest title in the Guinness Book of World Records, and the present record holder I think is around 4,000 words, has about 29,000 characters, and it's a medical book where like all this kind of sub information about some kind of, I think it's heart related stuff, is listed at length, sort of like an academic like journal article for the sciences. So that's how it wound up being that long. And so I thought it would be funny to try and do that. And so I texted John that idea, and then I drove to Safeway to get groceries or something, and I was laughing the whole time just thinking about how funny that would be. And then I thought it would be even funnier if I also abbreviated it immediately after the title, so doing like the first words are pissant, bib, Dollar Tree parts, so doing P dot B dot D dot T dot P dot, and including all of that in the title too, which I then did. And then John, I mean, and this is something like any of these books, I hadn't fully realized it until I tried doing InDesign stuff on my own. The stuff that John does with these books as far as design and that kind of thing, I mean, try, like if you haven't ever even opened InDesign or something, give it a shot sometime just to appreciate the range of stuff that he's done. And then he found ways to, like, it's printed in its entirety on the spine, it's printed the entire way across there, it's printed again there. It's on most of the pages in tiny script up in the corner. But yeah, so in a way, I dreamt of someday doing like a talk between me and John where we would have on one poster like it seemed funny, and on another one it seemed fucked up, and that just being kind of the thesis for a lot of the stuff we've done together. But I'm going to read a couple of things from just the manifesto-ish section, just because they're obviously a little bit easier to digest compared with the title, and then kind of wrap up before the barn gets blown away. Perhaps we are now at a point where in the work of art, and in particular the work of literature, in its more monastic forms, its more sleepy ancestral forms, must be cast aside for something closer to a living houseplant, a little nagging endeavor that each day we must sustain with several draughts of tap water, an imperfectible little daily obligation that keeps the ugly awarenesses in our brain from wounding us. The avant-garde is no porpoise, and some of these are from me, some of them are from other places. I'll acknowledge them where I can. The avant-garde is no porpoise. It merely lies in shock after an unfortunate bout with its own petard. It feigns sleep, but one eye glitters, and an involuntary twitch in the corner of the mouth belies a suppressed snicker. The giggle of coming awake at one's own funeral, dressed in atomic TV beatnik furniture, a mutant with a mission. That's from Gary Panter's Roz Talks Manifesto. Maintenance is a drag. It takes all the fucking time. The mind boggles and chafes at the boredom. The culture confers lousy status on maintenance jobs, minimum wages, housewives, no pay, clean your desk, wash the dishes, clean the floor, wash your clothes, wash your toes, change the baby's diaper, finish the report, correct the typos, mend the fence, keep the customer happy, throw out the stinking garbage. Watch out, don't put things in your nose. What shall I wear? I have no socks. Pay your bills. Don't litter. Save string. Wash your hair. Change the sheets. Go to the store. I'm out of perfume. Say it again. He doesn't understand. Seal it again. It leaks. Go to work. This art is dusty. Clear the table. Call him again. Flush the toilet. Stay young. That's from Mirla Lauderman Ukelis's Maintenance Art, which if you haven't checked it out is very good. Against particularized art, it will be a global practice with a bearing each moment on all the usable elements. Naturally, this would tend to collective production, which would be without doubt anonymous, at least to the extent where the works are no longer stocked as commodities. This culture will not be dominated by the need to leave traces. The minimum proposals of these experiences will be a revolution in behavior and a dynamic, unitary urbanism capable of extension to the entire planet and of being further extensible to all habitable planets. That's from the Situationist Manifesto. Creating this sort of work is not the sort of thing you can exactly abandon. Look into the lives of those who've truly been made to decide and ask yourself if you would in turn make the decision they've made to continue creating this work, be it prison, murder, impalement, desolation, loss of security, loss of anything at all. It's healthy to engage this imaginary judgment, this public crucifixion, and to imagine if you'd wake up in the mud of your shaming and start to write again in excrement on the walls of your new cell. Ask yourself these questions and be sure the thing means that much to you. Matthew Roberson, while studying for his doctorate, constantly so fascinated by the work of Ronald Sukenik, ended up writing a novel that takes the skeletal composition of Sukenik's 98.6, speaks it in the nod of an obsessed graduate student, and an update of a Sukenik text called 1998.6. Kathy Acker was comfortable using other people's words and structures. She called two of her most famous book-length projects, Great Expectations and Don Quixote, and used structural devices of their formative texts, Dickens and Cervantes that is, among other materials to create updated, skewed, and cross-referencing responses. Much has been said in recent times about plagiarism, or plagiarism, as Raymond Fetterman had it, as a valid literary resource in a world that is gradually becoming obscure in text with each passing day. Tomlin has perfected a type of archive poetry he calls ambient literature, using samples of material to create work that overlaps with the present and allows the future to bleed. The late career of David Markson was a compiled box of index cards on which he collected quotes and anecdotes. Those who say they die without being able to make their work are, of course, lying. Oh, this one I like because it's actually from, this one's from Maierhofer. Does anything in nature despair except man? An animal with a foot caught in a trap does not seem to despair. It is too busy trying to survive. It is all closed in to a kind of still, intense waiting. Is this a key? Keep busy with survival. Imitate the trees. Learn to lose in order to recover. And remember that nothing stays the same for long, not even pain, psychic pain. Sit it out, let it all pass, let it go. Hatred can be a useful tool like anything. It can even have a nobility to it when plucked from the morons who give hatred a bad name. Love can be a useful tool, though mostly in the abstract. I dream of a text composed by the world, everyone given a sentence. Perhaps not. I'm not a writer. I have no stake in my being thought of a writer. Yet if I do write, I want it to be as exacting as I can make it. I want whatever I doodle to be well doodled. Most of the writing I've done has been under other names, as a ghostwriter, to maintain my family, or else by writing potboilers, not that such endeavors could necessarily be told apart. Pharmaceutical drugs are as useful or not as anything else. Avoiding therapy or wellness or help in the name of the work is a fruitless endeavor. The massive walls of suicide are enough to show that. Don't complain unless it's about the absolute pissant, moronic, dipshit, ugly fucking pathetic world and keeping your head above water. A more modern and more tragic example I found recently in the person of an Australian naturalist, Dr. Walter Stimson, who lost all of his manuscript drawings and collections in the Great Fire of Chicago and was so excoriated by this irreparable misfortune that he never recovered from the shock and died the following year a broken man and unknown. Of course, the housemaid who lit the fire with the French Revolution is known to all, as well as Newton's Fido, Fido, you little know what you have done. There are many dangers in preserving the labors of years in manuscript form. Samuel Butler of Erewhon advised writing in copying ink and then pressing off a second copy to be kept in another and separate locality. My own precaution for these journals are more elaborate. Those who know about it think I am mad. I wonder. But I dare say I am a pathetic fool, an incredible self-deceiver. It's good to have some physical books around, some images too, and whatever other physical media that's meant something to you. I think there is a more sustained, more mild kind of violence that someone can harbor within themselves, that will color the fringes of their days and make a lonesome trip to the bathroom something potent and visceral that should be harnessed where possible. It's even a kind of violence that can embrace a worldly pacifism, interested as it is only in an inward-facing violence, a destruction or removal or warring with one's own self. If you are writing, then you should be cognizant of the sentence. It doesn't matter what kind of writing you're doing. The thing you should be focusing on is the sentence. It's a simple notion, but it's the most important thing that you can really fully take in as a person writing, the sentence. If you feel like you're hyper-aware of your language, the way your words click and scratch against one another in your futile attempts at putting something together, then you are on the right path. If you're worrying about things like character or drama or something else, then you are worrying about something else, because when it comes to the actual writing itself, your attention should be on the sentence, your language. This is so because the real tool of your work is language, and only language, and everything else will either fall in line or your language will be so particular as to become Wittgenstein. Whatever it becomes, though, it needs to be language first, and as language first, it needs to be the sentence. Nostalgia is not a tool. Chances are, if something worthwhile is happening, it isn't happening on a website run by a billionaire who'd happily sell the recorded lives of its users to retain their wealth. It seems a little alarming if you never feel shame about previous work, like the development just stopped. There are far worse things than shame. As I'm flipping through this, I feel plenty of pangs of shame at some of, especially my handwriting, which is just god-awful. I'll maybe read one or two more. The only thing you should look for in another artist's life and work is permission. Permission to be as you are. Permission to write what you need to write. Permission to try something new, to be vulnerable. Birds, bugs committing suicide on these lights behind us. Constraints are very useful. They are very, very useful, and I recommend them in every aspect of one's life. Constraints are very, very useful. The less certain you feel about the work you're doing, the more you should try to dig your heels into the moment. People will try to grab that moment and turn you into their milder sense of where you can go, and you'll either be hammered clean by the moment and rendered basically inert, or become so discouraged as to stop anyway. Yeah, maybe I'll stop with one from the actual Journal of a Disappointed Man by W.N.P. Barbellion. The facts are undeniable. Life is pain. No sophistry can win me over to any other view. And yet, years ago, I set out so hopefully and healthfully. What are birds' eggs to me now? My ambition is enormous but vague. I am too distributed in my abilities ever to achieve distinction. Thank you.